Well, I've made a number of trips to Pakistan over the past 2 years as part of roles I had to grow blockchain education and adoption across the world. A blockchain is just a different way to keep data, records of events in history. Oh, I'm going to give you this big circle rock in exchange for your 5 goats. Yeah. And it was the community consensus that said, okay, that's now your rock. And then if you wanted to give it to another friend to pay for something else, their house, you would need the community consensus to witness it. Bingo, that's exactly right. That is how blockchains work. Once people started realizing I can create my own coins and tokens, like on Ethereum, for example, there was that ICO craze. Then it went crazy. Now there's like 20,000 different cryptocurrencies, which is ridiculous. So I think blockchain still has a powerful future, but it has taken far longer in its journey. We're about 13 plus years now in Bitcoin's journey, but people only buy Bitcoin now as an investment.
Assalamualaikum everyone, and welcome to another episode of How Does It Work, a podcast by Pro Pakistani. We're very fortunate today. Our guest is Jimmy Nguyen, who is a blockchain and emerging technologies expert, and will explain what that means to us.
I hope so. Thank you for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. So let's start with, what are you doing here in Pakistan?
Well, I've made a number of trips to Pakistan over the past 2 years as part of roles I had to grow blockchain education and adoption across the world. And I used to be president of one of the global Bitcoin blockchain foundations called the BSV blockchain, based out of Switzerland, which is as we'll talk about, a more scaled version of blockchain so that it's more useful for data and payment transactions. And we started growing education and enterprise and government discussions of blockchain in the Middle East. And one of my former colleagues, now business partner, Mohammed Salman Anjum, is Pakistani. He lives in Dubai, but he ran our BSV blockchain hub out of Dubai for the MENA region and South Asia. And he's the one who kept telling me, Jimmy, we got to get to Pakistan. We got to get to Pakistan. There's this big young population of entrepreneurial people who want to work in tech, and blockchain needs to grow here. So I've been making a lot of trips. I'm here this particular week for the Leaders in Islamabad Business Summit run by Mohammed Asfar Hassan and the Nutshell Group, which he leads. And it's my third time speaking at one of his events. And it's really to help people understand the power of blockchain and other technology to help developing countries like Pakistan.
And what is the power? So we were talking about this off air as well, where, with AI, we can see ChatGPT, we see the results. When social media first came about, obviously you could feel what it was. Because blockchain isn't as easy to understand.
Absolutely.
Walk me through, like a layman like me, just an average Joe, why does blockchain matter and what does it do?
Great question. And I think the reason you and most people watching will have that question is all of the media attention about blockchain and digital currencies, in particular cryptocurrencies, has been completely skewed into the wrong focus, right? Everything people know about it's about cryptocurrency or NFT trading. And so people have lost focus on what blockchain was created to be. So in its simplest form, a blockchain is just a different way to keep data, records of events in history. So in today's world, we think about blockchain, as the basis for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And that is one use, but not the only use. But we'll use that as an example. In the world of payments, right, we trust a bank or a payment service company, in the US, PayPal, for example, to handle the transfer of money. I send you money, and then there's a bank or a payment processor in the middle. And that company keeps a record, a ledger, right, to track how much money is going in and out. And we have to trust that one company to maintain the ledger. Because of that, our financial systems become inefficient. Everyone who's participating in that process takes a cut of money, right? And it slows down the data flow. And so what blockchain in the form of the Bitcoin blockchain, which was the first really one to grow in the world, tried to do is to say, hey, we want to fix the internet, where on the internet, I can't send you money from the US to here in Pakistan without all these intermediaries in the middle. So it's not very efficient, and they take a cut of money. So it was trying to create a system where I could send to you anywhere in the world an amount of money, even small amounts, a couple US cents, without someone in the middle. And so how do you do that? Because someone normally has to be in the middle to keep a record of that and make sure I'm not double spending the money, for example, right, to cheat the system. And so what the Bitcoin blockchain and its white paper birthed to the world was the idea of, hey, we'll create a record-keeping system where there's not just one bank or payment company in the middle that keeps the ledger, but we have many, many people across the world contributing to updating this ledger, and everyone can keep a copy of it, and the whole public can see the ledger. With that, then there's a way to send payments, but it doesn't have to be payments. It could be sending a record of I sold my car to you. I sold my house to you.
Of sorts.
Right, like it's a record, a receipt, a record of an event.
Right.
The event could be I pay you. That event could be I graduated from university today. Here's my university certificate. It could be I bought this house today, the title to property.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Is there a future where we can imagine like real estate deals?
It's already being discussed across the world, and it's one of the good first use cases of blockchain, because I'll simplify it even more. So you have this record, these ledgers of entries. Instead of one person keeping it, lots of people across the world contribute to updating it, so no one person controls it. So what a blockchain ultimately is, and if you actually read the original Bitcoin white paper, it doesn't even use the word blockchain. That came later. Do you know what it calls it? A distributed timestamp server. Meaning it's a way to timestamp events in history. I send you a payment on this date. I buy a house and record the property title on this date. I'm a music artist. I make a music file and I upload it to the blockchain on this date. And every time someone accesses it to stream, like on Spotify or whatever, there's a record of that timestamp.
But you know, when you take the record, right? Like, so let's take a bank, for example. The reason that they take the fee is because we also give them a degree of the responsibility there.
Correct.
Right? So for example, if the Capital Development Authority in Islamabad takes the responsibility for property deed, they then are the people whose neck you go and grab in case something goes wrong. Now, with blockchain and in this world of everybody is the, keeping the ledger and everybody's sort of involved in it, can data be falsified? One, and two, if it is, who's responsible?
The reality is, data is only as good as what's put in, right? Yeah. People can falsify data today. And the blockchain is just a way to keep the records. It doesn't mean that the people, companies, government agencies that are involved in generating and using the data, their responsibility still exists, right? So let's take the example of property title. In the United States, if you buy a piece of real estate, you have to go to a recording entity, and the government, and say, and record the transfer of title. And so then they keep that. But then to access that record is, it's cumbersome. And the only difference in the blockchain scenario is the government entity would still be involved in probably certifying the property title. Somebody has to be what I call the party that writes to the blockchain. A blockchain's data, you can write to it, put data on it, and read from it, right? The government, let's talk about ID or passport information, the government entities would still be involved, and they would probably be the ones principally responsible for writing the data to the chain. They might outsource that to private service providers who take care of that, but it's their responsibility when you're talking about public data. But then what the blockchain does is allow the rest of the world to trust and more quickly access this timestamping records, so that it's easier to access. More people can build applications that interact with that data. So for example, once the property title is on the blockchain, maybe I want to make faster the process of when you can take a loan against that property. Maybe I want to make faster the process at which we can verify whether the title has not been transferred to other people. It's more important for types of assets which move quickly.
Right.
Property doesn't move that often. So it's useful, but not as useful.
Yeah, but for example, an ID card, in Pakistan, we have Nadra, which gives you like a ID card that needs to be updated often, or a driver's license.
And many businesses out there and places sometimes need to verify it, that it's accurate.
Yeah, of course.
I'll use an example, the data in the world. It often the same data lives in different buckets. Think about government information, right? Okay, how many times do you input your ID information in different places? well, what if that could all live in the same place and different applications could all access the same data from one blockchain?
Currently, you talk a lot about government, and I know you've done a lot of work within government for blockchain.
Yes.
And before we move to other things, I wanted to understand, is there government adoption in a big way in any country? And do we see those results?
Not really. Honestly, and
why doesn't the U.S. do it, for example? I mean,
that's a whole complicated story in the U.S. One of the challenges in the U.S. is there are so many different layers of government,
right? State and all of that.
State, and even at the federal government, so many different agencies. Getting them all to agree on any one thing is very difficult, right. And so there are some governments that are experimenting. Yeah. I think but I haven't seen a lot of actual use, and one of the reasons for that is it's hard to build these applications. It also requires taking something like national ID and moving that first to blockchain. Because when you think about it, all the records in our lives, we still have to tie them to who you are, right? Once national ID gets on a blockchain, then it's easier then to issue a driver's license
and everything else,
a passport, right, and link it to one ID. For example, with property title, if you buy a particular piece of property, we can record that on the blockchain now, but how do we tie it to you? Yeah. That's verifiable. So that's a bit of the challenge. There are some other things that are easier. So for example, one of the companies that I'm on the board of, which is a Dubai-based company, but with a Pakistani founder, it has a enterprise system for blockchain focused on right now accounting invoice management, but they've used it also with the Sindh Police Department here in a pilot project where they're taking the inventory data of the police stations and recording it to the blockchain so there's more trust, for example, in tracking the number of guns and ammunition that go in and out of the police station, the number of vehicles that go in and out, because that's public information. And to verify, or at least have a publicly time-stamped each day, here's what the log numbers are. It's designed to increase confidence, honesty, efficiency of accessing the data. So that's a pilot program, but that's an example of one good government use of blockchain.
And what about non-government, so like business usage, right? Okay, now I understand there's something called blockchain. This is how it's helping me. How do I use it in businesses? So everybody's like, oh, you have to be blockchain integrated. What does that mean?
Well, so what I've seen of the last years is this kind of like frenzy race of a lot of business thinking, oh, I need to
be blockchain enabled.
But they don't really know what it means. And so I've spent a lot of time sitting down with companies and asking, well, why do you want to add blockchain? And really we're trying to educate them about what blockchain can do and not do. And what I usually start with is, let's talk about your data. Where are the problems and inefficiencies in your data that you want to try and solve? And then I can give them suggestions about where blockchain may be useful or not. So I'll give you a few examples. So a lot of industries are looking at it, and there's been a lot of test pilots, but frankly, not a lot of widespread use. But the industries where it's really helpful are supply chain management, right? When you are dealing with the travel of product from manufacturing factory to distribution warehouse, then sending it overseas, there's all these places where that shipment has to be tracked. And right now, the customs tracking systems you depend on everyone having different databases and data sets. And so it's slow and cumbersome. So a lot of people are building blockchain applications where they're getting all of those players to send the data to a blockchain so that you can see it in more real time, the actual journey of the product. You can also use that to verify its source of origin. How do we know that is really Chilean sea bass? How do we really know that's Pakistani mangoes, right? Because you can verify with information put on the blockchain the source of origin and then its travel to where it gets to its final endpoint. And then that will allow the businesses involved to more quickly track, collect their cuts of money, will allow governments to collect customs taxes hopefully faster. And then for consumers who are worried about the source of their food or want to determine, oh, this particular food item doesn't have particular nut allergies, for example, in the future, not now, it will allow us to, with mobile apps that interact with the blockchain, see the journey of the food and the source of origin. So that is one example where it can help business, government, and us as consumers. The path to get to where we are today with blockchain and making that a reality, it's, to be honest, longer than anyone would have liked. But that's an example of how having a public ledger that shows events in history, the journey of food and where it came from, is something that could be really useful.
And talk to me a bit about, so the Bitcoin paper, that was where blockchain was first introduced?
Kind of.
Crypto came before blockchain.
So I'll give you a quick history lesson for your audience. The idea of a blockchain first came up in some research papers done by two California scientists, Scott Stornetta and Stuart Haber, who were in the 1990s looking at the emergence of the internet and realizing, oh, we're going to start putting more documents and records online. But how do we know if they're authentic? Because they're digital, right? They're not a piece of paper like this that you have a wet signature on. And so they started looking at this, and they published some research papers that looked at the idea of digital timestamping of documents that are digitized to be able to verify this is the document version that existed on a particular date. Right? And so they published these papers, and that was the first real concept of blockchain. They looked at the idea of, well, if we digitally timestamp a document and allow the record of that to be published for multiple people to see, when I show the document later, you don't have to trust one central database. Multiple people have verified in the past that this is the document that existed on this date. That was the first sort of concept of blockchain. And the Bitcoin white paper, if you actually read it, two of its footnotes, its references are to those papers about digital timestamping. So I go back to that concept. It's really just a way to timestamp events in history and not depend on one person to keep the timestamps, but we can all maintain
it's
and see it.
Almost as if when we were like in tribal situations.
Yes.
There was witnesses, right?
Yes, bingo.
You would go and you'd be like,
bingo.
3 people
Absolutely.
saw these 2 guys shake hands on the deal.
Right, and traded the goat, right?
Yeah.
In fact, there's a ancient civilization, one of, I think, the island countries, that use big circular rocks as the representation of value, money. And they would have the community witness, oh, I'm going to give you this big circle rock in exchange for your 5 goats. And it was the community consensus that said, okay, that's now your rock. And then if you wanted to give it to another friend to pay for something else, their house, you would need the community consensus to witness it. Bingo, that's exactly right. That is how blockchains work, which is a published record of events for which there is consensus that happened and that's right.
Tribal living, but just digitized on the internet, right?
Yep.
And that takes me to my next question, which is that what crypto is also meant to be? Is it meant to be a world where no one decides what, people, for example, there's always a conversation that the dollar is manipulated depending on the situation, depending on the Fed, etc. And why should we have reserve currencies? We don't have gold anymore. So we have the right as citizens of the world to, have a different. Is that what crypto was meant to be?
Well, it depends on who you ask, right? Part of the issue is that when the Bitcoin white paper was published, it was published under this pseudonym, fake name, Satoshi Nakamoto. And there's been this huge debate over the years about who he is. That's a whole topic for another day.
I have that question on the list.
Well, we'll talk about if you can ask me later. But Bitcoin was not the first attempt to create a digital currency or electronic cash. There were others that failed. And part of the reason they failed is they created systems that were too focused on like privacy, anonymity. And that's a big debate now. It's why a lot of people don't trust cryptocurrency, why a lot of governments don't. They think, oh, I don't want an anonymous source of electronic money because then criminals can use it. And so Bitcoin tried to address that by creating an open, honest ledger. The word honest is used actually 15 times in the Bitcoin white paper. So even though today it has this bad reputation among a lot of people, especially governments and institutional investors.
Stuff like that.
If you read its true purpose, it was very simple. It was to solve a problem the internet didn't have, which is when the internet got created, it's a very efficient way in internet protocol to send data to anyone across the world. I can send you an email, I can send you my social media images, but it did not have a native way to send payments. And that's why as the internet grew, we had to layer on top of the internet all these payment processing intermediaries, PayPal, credit card processing, right? That's where the inefficiency started. But what if there was a way for me to send to you directly peer-to-peer across the internet payments, not even big payments, small payments, so that you run an online site for your media outlet. What if instead of having a subscription model, every time I access your site, I had to pay you a small amount of money for everything I read. There's not a native way to do that on the internet. That's what Bitcoin was actually intended to solve if you read the white paper. It was intended to solve this problem of how do I send not big amounts of money, not Bitcoin where I'm going to invest and hodl it, hold it, and try to get rich, but a small amount of money so I can access services.
Right.
That's really what it was intended to be. Unfortunately, in my view, as someone who's worked in the industry full-time since about 2015, it got completely skewed off. The narrative of Bitcoin got taken over by what I call the cypherpunk world, where they believed Bitcoin was meant to create a money system out of the control of government. And it attracted all these people in the beginning who were like, yeah, we need to decentralize the world. Governments, big banks are bad, right?
And that hipster reputation.
Correct. It's like the renegades of the world. And so they're the ones who became the really early crypto voices.
The custodians for some reason.
Right. And that is why I think the journey of Bitcoin to be an efficient internet payment system got completely derailed. It's why the impression of blockchain, even though people are starting to understand it, it's hard to talk to some businesses and government officials about adopting it because they go, oh, but crypto bad. So I think that's unfortunate. And that's why people like me, I was a lawyer in the United States for 21 years. I come across this at a very let's comply with the law of the world approach, because that's the only way it'll grow to a global adoption. So I don't think Bitcoin was intended to be this let's create a money system out of the control of government. It certainly can function that way. But then what happened is once people started realizing I can create my own coins and tokens, like on Ethereum, for example, there was that ICO craze. Then it went crazy. Now there's like 20,000 different cryptocurrencies, which is ridiculous.
And
the world does not need that.
It's a pump and dump scheme because there's just so many of them.
So when people figured out I could make money, make my own coin, get it listed on an exchange, keep some of the coins myself and sell it, and then get out, right? It has tarnished the industry. And a lot of the collapses of big exchanges like FTX, right, and the scandals around that, is bad for people like me who are trying to advocate for blockchain for good. Right. And it slowed down the progress of the industry. And it's why you don't see as much blockchain use in real life as you see now with AI, which has like gone, super crazy, and people can see it and use it and touch it. And they're excited about it. So I think blockchain still has a powerful future, but it has taken far longer in its journey. We're about 13 plus years now in Bitcoin's journey. But people only buy Bitcoin now as an investment tool. No one pays for anything for it, right? And that's not what it was intended to be. It was intended to be an efficient internet payment system, not a reserve asset to try and get rich with.
I heard this, and I know this is not true, but I'm going to tell you this really weird theory I heard once on the internet. You know how it is, especially cryptos have a lot of, like we said, hipster sort of beliefs. So anyways,
I wouldn't even call it hipster. I would call it renegade.
Yeah, very renegade belief, very different, and that's cool. But this theory was that the governments of the world created crypto so that all the new money would invest into crypto as a pump and dump scheme to keep themselves rich and decrease the world's whatever.
Yeah.
I don't believe that, obviously.
I don't either.
Yeah, that's a really far-fetched idea. But you said you had a theory on who created crypto, and more importantly, why is all the... I mean, one of the things I find fascinating is why the anonymity? Like, what everything else Bill Gates didn't say, oh, I don't know who created Microsoft, or Mark Zuckerberg didn't...
Well, the reason is because there were, as I mentioned, prior attempts to create an electronic cash that was not government issued. Right, the money we use in the world is what we call fiat currency, issued by a government or regulatory authority. And the prior attempts to create an electronic cash, there was Eagle, something called DigiCash, and some other things. They all sort of failed. They got in trouble with the government because you have to think about this time. This was 2008, 2009, where now this world is sort of accepted, not accepted, but sort of normalized. But whoever was trying to create one of these systems in the past was probably very worried about a government entity saying, you know what, you cannot issue money, right? That's our job and you're violating law. So I think that's why Satoshi Nakamoto was pseudonymous, for all this time. And there's been this, internet great mystery for years about who Satoshi Nakamoto is as a person or as a group or as who knows, right?
So what do you think?
Okay, well, now you're asking me to walk into a very long conversation.
It's just for fun, yeah.
Well, it's not just for fun because I actually have a whole very personal experience in this world. So my role over the last years was to be president of the global foundation organization behind, now Bitcoin is split into competing chains. One of the competing chains is called Bitcoin SV, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. And I was president of that global foundation for BSV for the last about 4 or 5 years. The chief scientist who is leading the technical vision for that is an Australian computer scientist named Dr. Craig Wright, who claims he is Satoshi Nakamoto. A lot of the digital asset, blockchain, and crypto world thinks he's a liar, and that's not true. Personally, I do believe it's him, and there is a contingent of the world that does believe it's him, but it's highly controversial. I also believe that at this point it doesn't matter. I think that if any of the versions of Bitcoin that exist out there, including BSV, are going to succeed, it's got to come down to convincing people to use it at mass scale. But that's a whole much longer conversation.
Yeah.
But I have worked with the man that I and some other people at least believe is Satoshi Nakamoto. I've since left my role at that organization and launching my own business initiatives, in part because I wanted to focus more on not that whole controversy, but more on building useful applications of blockchain technology and other technologies.
Wait, I have one follow-up question regarding this. Why do you think it's him? And how can one possibly know? It's like the Messiah, right? I mean, who knows, right? I always like in Christian religions, in Islam, in Judaism, in all of these religions, there will always be the Messiah who comes to save. But I always wonder, how do you know if the person is?
I think it's one of those things you can never know with 100% certainty, but he has an unparalleled knowledge of the Bitcoin system and network and what it can be used for outside of just crypto trading. He has a desire to use it as an honest public ledger for business and enterprise and government. And there are other reasons, but it's too long to get into today.
Fair enough. Okay, so next question. Now walk us through this other sort of landmine that is called NFTs and the craze that came with it. And what was that meant to be originally?
So I think the NFT craze that happened is another phase in what I call the every 12 to 18 months, there's a hype, get rich quick phase in this industry. It was started with the ICO craze. Once people figured out it was easy to make their own token on the Ethereum network using what's called this ERC20 token protocol. And then you saw this big rush of everyone had a coin, right? And they realized, I can get rich quick. And then there's others like STOs and IEOs. There's all these acronyms. So the NFT craze happened. And I've heard about NFTs for quite some time. And I thought that the craze was another one of those phases. Here's what an NFT is and the good use of NFTs. So NFT stands for Non-Fungible Token.
Yeah.
So what a token is just a representation of something else, right? So if you buy stock in a public company, you get a stock certificate. Right. That certificate isn't the thing you own. It's just a representation. It's a token of the fact that somewhere it is recorded that you hold.
It's like a digital receipt.
It's right. And so that's what a digital NFT should be. It's like a digital receipt. It is when you use cash, that is considered fungible. Fungible means interchangeable. Yeah. So if I give you a Pakistani rupee bill, you won't care for the most part whether it's my bill or someone else's bill,
right?
Because they're interchangeable, they're fungible.
Right. Non-fungible meaning
there's something special about that one thing. It's unique. So, for example, if you go into restaurants, often restaurant owners have frames on their wall, the first bill they ever received, right? That has more value to them, sentimental value. Right. That is what I would call non-fungible. Right. It's unique. So what a non-fungible token is on a blockchain is when you're dealing with Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, in most instances, if I send you a Bitcoin or other digital asset, you won't care which one it is, right? It has the same, they all should have the same value at any given time. And so what a non-fungible token is recording an asset on a blockchain, like a receipt, a ledger entry of it, that represents something unique. Your car, and here's a certificate, right, recorded on the blockchain that represents your vehicle because there's just only one, right? Here's where they got confused. So in the game world, which I know is popular in Pakistan, this is where I first started hearing about it because people have all these in-game items, right? Oh, I have this special magic sword that's going to make me more powerful and beat you. It takes me a while to earn it. And in games, people start to try and trade those. And so what people start thinking about in the game world is, hey, not all magic swords are interchangeable. Maybe you have the super special one, and we can record that on a blockchain and make it more easy to trade and use between games because it's a digital thing that's receipt verified on a blockchain that's special. Where things got confusing is that somebody then came up with the idea of, hey, let's take a picture, an image, Bored Apes. That's the big thing, the Bored Ape Yacht Club.
I remember.
And we're going to make not just one ape that's unique. We're going to make 100 different variations where they just change the hair color, the scarf on the ape, whatever. And they started selling them, saying each one's unique, buy one. And what people look at is, well, I'm just getting a picture of an ape, but they're all unique. And so but because people started making a lot of money, there was this frenzy on it. You started this whole wave of craziness of everyone going, I'm just going to make a set of cats. I'm going to make a set of, Pakistani trucks, right? How I would describe it is the things weren't inherently unique. There was manufactured uniqueness. They would make algorithms to say, let's create a template of a cat and have an algorithm that just changes different elements of it and sell it out. And then because people started trading them and the prices went higher, it went into this total frenzy. It's like the Beanie Baby craze from years ago, right? So I think what happened with the NFT world is another example of, okay, fine, you made money, but you really didn't do anything useful. But where NFTs can be useful are finding things that are unique. So, for example, trees. Right? I've been trying to get a project up and running where there's a company in Australia, for example, that I've been working with that puts IoT devices on trees for environmental data collection, right? In a park for example, in a city in Australia. In addition to that, you could create an NFT, which is a digital replica of each tree, and then record that on the blockchain because every tree is unique, and then sell that NFT to the marketplace, which could represent hey, you want to donate and claim this tree for a year, and the money you provide for that NFT, where you can get to claim this is my tree for the year, or I sort of, sponsored it, goes to a fund for the city to help take care of the park and advance environmental goals, right? And then you could also see the tree in mobile apps and things, but it's a digital receipt that you, for this year, contributed whatever amount of money. You don't own the tree, but you're claiming like a digital certificate.
Makes sense.
Right? That, I think, is a good positive use of NFTs. And there's all kinds of things in between. But it's getting away from this idea of let's make all kinds of different pictures and art pieces, which are sort of fake unique.
Yeah.
They're unique, but they're manufactured by computer algorithms. Right. No one really needs the Bored Ape.
Of course.
And it was driven up in value just by hype, as opposed to going, wait a minute, what are the things that are unique in the world where there's a value to having that receipt on the blockchain and verifying it? A collectible item. Okay, the sneakers Michael Jordan wore in, NBA finals games. Okay, you bought them and here's a receipt on a blockchain that verifies this is the actual one. That's a good NFT.
Anything rare that you can verify.
Real uniqueness.
Yeah. Well, this is really interesting. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I just have one final question. Sure. Why does a lawyer in the U.S. Decide that now is the time to completely change up your career and go into this?
Well, I made that decision many years ago, actually.
Yeah. So why did you decide that?
I was a digital technology lawyer, and my career started in the mid-1990s at the boom of the .com Silicon Valley internet world. Right. So I spent my legal year, which was 21 years, and I was a partner in several major U.S. law firms, helping companies navigate the growth of the internet world, from startups to the big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Uber. And then some of my clients started calling me around 2012 about Bitcoin, digital currencies, virtual items in games. So I had to start kind of learning this area. And frankly, I was getting a little bored being a lawyer. I knew I wanted to get more into the business world. And when my clients helped, launch the company that became what is known as N-Chain, where Dr. Craig Wright is he or isn't he Satoshi Nakamoto, and asked me to take a role, and I ultimately became CEO of that company. So it wasn't that I changed out of law, but I stayed within the technology world because my whole career had been learning new technologies. Right. And I saw blockchain. And I got into the field before it became super hot, right? And all my friends at the time going, "What are you doing?" But because I saw it as the next data network with the power of the internet that was coming into the world. And that's why I got into it starting around 2015, 16. And I'll leave with this kind of last example on how it relates to Pakistan, because I saw this is what it could do. As I mentioned, I am friends with and I am a board member of the company called InvoiceMate with a Pakistani founder, Mohammed Salman Anjum. And it uses blockchain to track the journey of invoices. You're not that sexy, but it makes it more efficient for companies to get paid, right? You don't have to call up going, "Where's my invoice?" Everyone can look at the same journey of the invoice. But here's the kind of power I was seeing and made me want to leave law to really focus on the business. He's now created a mechanism where he is pairing SMEs, right? Small, medium business, a truck driver, pharmacies here in Pakistan who need cash faster. They send out invoices, but sometimes they have to wait 30 to 60 days to get paid. Banks here in Pakistan have not been willing to do what's called invoice financing, where they'll pay some amount of money faster on the invoice and take like a cut off of it.
That's a problem for like SMEs, big businesses,
Correct.
Everyone. Yeah.
But with Mohammed's and InvoiceMate's blockchain verification of the invoices, they've been able to convince and now sign deals with 4 Pakistani banks and 1 UAE financing solution to offer up money and credit pools to lend and do financing against invoices for SMEs and create a marketplace that matches these two.
That's actually
and it's launching.
value.
Yeah, it is. And so they've signed deals, for example, with Jazz to access sort of their SME business database, with the Pakistan Freelancers Association to offer this to all the freelancers who are part of that organization, with Mentor Health, which has a whole network of pharmacies. And they've signed deals with MobileLink, for example, and Zindagi JS Bank to offer to be some of the banking sources. So that is a perfect example where blockchain is kind of under the hood, but can deliver real value to both SMEs and money for the banks by doing something very simple. Verifying events in history, invoices and the accuracy of them, and timestamping them and making that verifiable on blockchain. And then that powers now a solution for access to cash and financial inclusion.
Wow, yeah, that's actually really useful.
So it's launching. They're in the middle of integrating now with Jazz, and I think starting in August it should be launching. So I'm proud to be a board member of that and help them grow around the world. But that is the kind of work I want to see. But it takes longer,
of course,
than making my own coin or making my own NFT, right? It's longer, it's harder, but for me it's more rewarding and an evolution of the work I have done across the world as a lawyer and now as a blockchain leader.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you. This was really enlightening. I think I learned a lot and finally have a much better idea of what all this is supposed to be. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have you back on when you're here next.
I'm sure I'll be back in Pakistan soon. This is, I think, trip number 6 for me already in the last couple of years, and we've got a lot of opportunities here. And I honestly, one thing I will say to your audience, the Pakistani people are an amazingly creative, entrepreneurial, minded group of people who I think with the right technology, the right innovation opportunities can really advance this developing country.
I sincerely hope so. Thank you again. Thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you guys for watching. If you do enjoy our content, please do subscribe to our channel and we will see you for the next podcast.